Welcome to our Timoney Leader Series. My name is Ronan O'Farrell, the CEO of the Timoney Leadership Institute, and you're very welcome to our interview with Dr. Kevin Majeres. Dr. Majeres is a practicing psychiatrist based in Boston, and he's on the faculty of the Harvard Medical School, where he teaches psychiatrists in training. He's also the founder of Optimal Work, an organization which promotes a positive psychology of work and which helps individuals and leaders transform themselves day by day. Kevin is an author and hosts a weekly podcast called The Golden Hour, where he shares practical tools to challenge yourself to work at your best. And I'd highly recommend taking a look at that podcast, and you may find it as helpful in your work and personal life as indeed I do. So delighted to welcome you, Kevin, and thanks for joining us on the Timoney Leader Series. Great to have you here.
Great to be here, Ronan. Thanks so much for inviting me.
So our theme is on how to grow through your leadership challenges. And maybe just before we delve into the discussion, if any of our listeners have questions or comments during the session, please do use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll try to get to some of those questions. You can even upvote for ones that you'd like to be asked. But well, Kevin, many of our listeners today are in leadership positions and have faced quite a unique set of challenges in both work and personal lives in the past year, and indeed stretching into this year. So I sense there's a general weariness and fatigue, which the latest lockdown has produced for many people, and our personal resilience is definitely being tested. So some of us are probably asking, how can I be more resilient? So maybe if I can ask you that question, what is resilience and how can we have more of it?
Yeah, this is a big question in everyone's mind. How can the current challenges actually help us? How do you put them really to the best use? I think that it's a question of changing your relationship to challenge itself. Many times when we're facing challenges, we see that these challenges that keep recurring don't necessarily bring out the best in us. And I would encourage people listening to this to think about the challenge right now. One of the challenges you're facing that you think is bringing out the worst in you. Mm-hmm. Think of the challenge you're putting off, where you procrastinate the most. That challenge, I would say, is precisely where you're going to have the deepest growth in your character, in your skills, in your personal life and relationships, once you decide to, in a positive way, engage that challenge and then actively challenge yourself to grow in it. So resilience, I think, is really a new word for the old concept of fortitude. And fortitude really means facing up to challenges and thriving on them. And that means growing and learning and practicing as you approach challenge.
And what if that challenge seems overwhelming in some way, an external challenge?
I know, and you're right to say overwhelming and external in the very same breath, because when we're overwhelmed, it's a question of the location of the challenge. Where is it? Is it outside of you or inside of you? When the challenge is outside of you, it feels external to you, like something out there, and it takes away your energy. It's enervating and overwhelming. But within that, hidden within that challenge, there is something that you could get better at, something that would make that challenge easier and enjoyable and even meaningful. And that is what you have to locate and then actively challenge yourself in it. The moment you start actively challenging yourself to grow in whatever that thing is you've been avoiding, you no longer feel overwhelmed. When you're overwhelmed, the challenge in some way is imaginary for you. It's in your head still. But when you engage it, it's real and doable. So we just try to get people to not try when they feel overwhelmed, just to push their way through unthinkingly. Instead, pause and try to see, what would it look like for me to engage this challenge at my very best? That is a key then to seeing a path for this challenge to actually be good for you, and then you can embrace it.
Okay. So are challenges then always a good thing for us?
Growth is always a good thing, and challenges are the only way we grow. So if you went to a gym that didn't challenge you at all, there's nothing there that made your muscles actually flex, well, then there'd be no growth in that gym. So life is like a gym. And so, whatever seems to be the challenge you would complain most about and dread the most is precisely the best workout for you. The reason it's hard is that's where your growth lies. So you have to see not the aspect of it just as hard, but no, to see there's a way that you can learn to engage this challenge. And then as you start to grow, you get an incredible surge of energy.
Okay, so you'd see these challenges then, let's say a leadership challenge, as more as an opportunity to grow and through this to develop that resilience all the time.
Exactly. And as soon as you say opportunity, what we're talking about in one sense is what's called reframing. Oh. Reframing it's like a psychological jujitsu move. It's an art where you take something that seems like a threat and you flip your way of viewing it to now it feels like an opportunity. And you do that by thinking, is there any kind of skill or quality that I could grow in that would make me thrive in the midst of that challenge? And there always is. Is there any role model you have that could handle this challenge very well? This is your chance to be like them. So reframing is changing your view of the challenge so that instead of just being a threat you want to avoid, it's an opportunity to be embraced. That causes a profound shift in the entire functioning of the brain. When you reframe, you activate the highest part of your cortex. It's the ventromedial prefrontal cortex. That allows you to engage reality in a new way, not just treating it as some rote thing that you've seen many times, and that you've avoided many times. Now it's like a new opportunity. And it allows you to bring your fullest IQ, your whole intelligence into engaging that challenge. While you're seeing it as a threat, you actually get stuck in what we call threat mode. And threat mode is all about minimizing challenge and minimizing effort and work. And that is not a place for a leader to thrive.
Okay, which is kind of running away a bit from the challenge that's there and
yes,
hoping it will go away by itself.
Yeah, we all tend to do it. And that's why the running away is understandable and it's automatic. The engaging, it needs to be intentional. It needs to be deliberate and reflective.
Okay. And what advice would you have for leaders on helping others in their team to be more resilient? Perhaps they're facing the similar challenges, and can a leader help, or is this a journey that each person has to go on by themselves?
I think that leaders are able to create a tone around them. And that tone can reflect their view of challenge. So that if the leader is viewing, is in threat mode and is trying to minimize challenges, he or she is going to be projecting a sense that the difficulties are obstacles and people are going to end up complaining. I think the number one question for a leader to ask is there a culture of complaining in my office? The culture of complaining means that people are going to be in threat mode. They're going to be avoiding challenge. They're going to be procrastinating on things. They're going to be just getting by and just getting things done. That's completely different than people who are excited about growing, who have leaders who are helping them think about ways they can grow, who are helping them to reframe challenges. When you help others to make that flip, whatever the thing was that they were complaining about and dreading, to now see a way forward where it can actually bring out the best in them, that's the essence of giving encouragement. To be encouraging is to help others reframe. And the tone of an office, the tone of any kind of corporation can be either encouraging or discouraging. And it has to do with the leader's view, in a large part, of challenge.
Okay, very good. And in that could you give a particular example maybe of reframing a challenge? What's involved in that, in reframing a challenge?
Well, you can think of it, think of a person who annoys you. and that you would dread having to be in a meeting with or dread having to work with. Okay, you could just then view that person as a threat. Maybe not like you're intimidated by the person, but just you would rather avoid them. And your avoidance of them becomes more and more just automatic. Okay, that person is giving you a unique chance to practice growing in the best and highest qualities. We call them ideals. So you could think, okay, maybe this person is giving me a chance to be, well, maybe they're a complainer, and so it's giving you a chance to learn how to be encouraging, to learn how to be understanding, to learn how to be cheerful, even with people who bother you. And you could ask yourself, if you got really good at that, and say people who bother you can actually they bring out of you this embracing of the challenge in a cheerful way, who else in your life would benefit? Well, your family would benefit, right? Those closest to you would benefit. Wouldn't it be wonderful that even when you're tired and not looking forward to something, you could still respond in a positive, optimistic, cheerful way? So once you start looking at growing in ideals, finding ways to exercise patience, understanding, cheerfulness, then the very people who are hardest to deal with are like, they give you the best workout. They give you they're like the best gym you could have. And you could think, if I can handle this person, and if I can stay positive and cheerful, then I could do it anywhere. So whenever you're thinking about growing in ideals, you're really thinking about long-term growth versus short-term feeling good.
Okay.
Yeah, if you let the person have it and you're rude to them, you might like momentarily feel a little bit of relief, but that's short-term. And leaders always need to be thinking of the long-term.
Long-term.
And even in themselves, what's the best kind of long-term growth? And then you make the reframing even more secure by thinking of one practical skill you would then be growing in. And maybe the skill would be dealing with an annoying person, working on your tone of voice, and trying to talk to that person in the same tone that you would use with your friends. Okay, that's a wonderful skill to have. And it does make you patient with people, and it helps you with your family too. And now you have a concrete way of practicing it, and you can look forward to the next meeting with that person saying, I know exactly what I'm going to practice. Now the challenge has moved to be within you. You are actively challenging yourself, and in a way, the worse the person is, the better, because it's just going to give you better practice. And you've reframed something if now you can say, the harder it is, the better, bring it on.
Okay, so bring on the challenges.
Yes.
Okay,
exactly.
Okay, very good, very good.
And that's the deepest essence of resilience, that the challenges bring out the best in you. At that point, you become what we call anti-fragile. An anti-fragile system, Nassim Taleb has the wonderful book on this, is a system that gets stronger under stress. And that has to do with humans are anti-fragile if they continually have this positive way of reframing challenges as opportunities to grow. And it naturally means improving how you work, getting better at what you do, but that according to even higher ideals. Ideals are really the long-term growth in your character and organization.
Okay, very good. Yeah, well, that certainly resonates. And in optimal work, I know this comes up in terms of a practical approach to the tasks at hand, to the goals ahead in the coming day, how you might approach your work.
Yeah.
What can you tell us a little bit more about that and how that might tie in with what you've just been talking about?
Yeah, so if you really want to get good at something, you need to practice it frequently. Let's say that a person is nervous about speaking in public and doing things. Well, if that person does it every 2 years, it's hard to get better at it. Mm-hmm. But if they did it daily, they'd become a pro at it pretty fast, really. So these skills of reframing challenges, setting a positive challenge for yourself that will stretch you, need to be practiced frequently. The best way of doing that is learning how to do it in your work, so that you turn an hour of work into a gym that is going to exercise you in the ways that you find best and most meaningful. So what optimal work is all about is essentially not just sitting down and working the way you always do, because that's the rote part, the automatic part, and it will not bring out the best in you. You might get things done, but you won't grow, and things eventually get stale. Instead, it's about pausing, thinking about the next hour you're going to do, and turning into what we call a golden hour. That just means that you pause beforehand and deliberately shaped it. Now we have 3 steps that if you follow these steps, not only does the task become new to you and open to growth in all these ways, you also go into flow. Flow is this state of mind in which you have your highest intelligence, your least distractibility and impulsivity, your best capacity to synthesize and engage the task at hand. Flow is the height of working at your best. And even neurologically, there are reasons for these 3 steps in this order. Reframing the next hour of work into an opportunity to grow. Mindfully bringing your attention out of your imagination, out of your head, completely into the present moment and holding it there. And then actively stretching yourself in a challenge. Reframing, mindfulness, challenge. Those are the 3 steps that if you learn to get practice at them, you can get practiced at entering flow at will.
And flow there, I mean, is that kind of like getting in the zone when you talk about for, you know, sports people and they get in this zone? Is that what you've just described there, something in a minute or 2 minutes that you put yourself in that sort of?
So usually it kind of depends on how distractible you are.
Yeah.
You know, so that if and how much you're dreading the task or reluctant to get engaged in it, how tempted you're going to be to multitask and to get off.
I was just about to ask that actually. Multitasking doesn't sound like it fits in there very easily.
Yeah, so optimal work, in my approach, is all about how do you bring your highest intelligence into a task at hand. But you only have so much for that task. And if you do 2 tasks, you take your IQ and divide it by 2. If you're doing 3 tasks, you divide it by 3. You cannot give your full intelligence to multiple things at the same time. No one can. You can get good at switching quickly, between things. You know, I think of doctors in the emergency room. Yeah, you have to deal with things, but while you're taking care of one patient, everything is on that patient, even if you have to rapidly switch to another. So switching and giving your whole attention from one thing after another, I call that sequential unitasking. So, but it's a precondition to working at your best that you're working only on one thing. You're working on one thing, you've broken it down into some steps that you're going to follow. And then as you put your whole attention into the first step, which is what mindfulness trains you to do, the next step kind of magnetically pulls your attention to it as you finish that step, go to the next one seamlessly. And then the next step pulls you, and the next step pulls you, and you can learn to train yourself to get pulled through your tasks, and that's how you go into flow.
Okay. And how important then are breaks in all of that? I mean, many people have the sense that they're just on all day, from online, straight into home life. You're working from home, homeschooling, caring for the family. It's all.
Yeah, work can become a kind of amorphous mess. Just one large lump that goes through the whole day. And I call that, doing a marathon. But this way of working, what I'm talking about is more like taking sprints. You have a sprint and then you have a break, and you have a sprint and you have a break. That is the way we're designed to work. Even our visual systems don't really allow us to have laser focus like you do when you're reading things all day long without a cost. But you have a tight focus on the work that you're doing, and then after, say, between 45 minutes to 90 minutes, something like that, you have a complete stop, and then do something, you go for a walk, do something light, don't work, don't do anything for 10 minutes or so. And then you come back, you set the stage briefly again, and you're off. With that, you actually can have sustainable energy all day long.
Okay, so you'd every hour take some time.
Yeah, so you need breaks between things. It's great in companies that there's a kind of, sometimes companies do this, they have a rule that meetings end 5 minutes before the hour, always. So at least there's a 5-minute break if people have back-to-back meetings. You get much more out of the meetings. There is something about, there's a certain skill here hidden in it, which is actually stopping on time. Honoring a stop time for a period of work is super important, because it means as you're going through the task and you have the steps you want to get through, you get an increase in adrenaline as that stop time approaches, because there's a hard stop. It's like if you have a meeting and there's no stop time set for the meeting, well then, even if you have an agenda, it's going to feel like you're floating. But if there's a hard stop time, everyone's mind will help them to pull through and get through all the points of the agenda in the right pace.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's very useful, and it brings up the related topic of stretch goals. So if you're setting yourself stretch goals, how does that help in the intensity there of what you're talking about in terms
Absolutely.
of reading and optimal work? It's not just about settling into your own little flow of how I'm comfortable doing it at my pace, but
yeah, it means in some way you have to really impact your way of working. So for instance, even say in reading, if you have some article or report or chapter you have to read, you could just do that the way you always do it, or you could think more intelligently about your way of going about reading this and think of what are your goals for getting out of it. And you'll find that there are better and better ways of reading, of learning how to divide the text into little compartments before you start. Then see the flow of the argument before you start, and then dive into the details one after another. Yeah. If you do that, you'll be able to remember the whole thing much better. So I want people to set stretch goals in the quality of how they do work. And what happens is you just stay engaged much more with the task, because a precondition for flow actually is some internal challenge. For you to go into flow doing anything, it really is actually a function of the stretch goal you set for yourself in it. The better you hit the sweet spot of the stretch, and that can't be ridiculous, it can't be something that is totally beyond you, there's a sweet spot. Learning how to, but just imagine if in every hour of work you stretched yourself to improve in one little way, like a 5% stretch, that adds up enormously, because you multiply hours of work day after day, week after week.
Yeah, very good, very good.
But the stretch actually is what sets how much you grow. In any task. Just like if you're going to the gym, the stretch goal you set with the weights you're going to do or how fast you're going to run, that actually determines then how much you grow in it. So if you want to grow in your work, you need to have a deliberate stretch. Quality is best. Quantity can suffice if you can't think of, a quality goal.
Yeah. Okay. And having a time limit, obviously, as well. So not just the never ending out. Whenever I get to the end, I'll finish. You set a goal on it. Yeah, very good.
Yeah, and then you take a break and you just pick up where you left off. The better people are also taking the task they're going to work on and breaking it into some clear steps. The easier it is to come back to it, the easier it is to stop on time and then to restart it. And the easier it is to also make good use of small blocks of time when they have them.
Okay.
To put the first real skill of order, if you're going to do something, you could think of paying taxes. Okay, I have to do this. Maybe in procrastinating it. And the more you put it off, the more like a heavy lump it seems, and it actually puts you into threat mode. Anytime you procrastinate, it puts you into threat mode. Well, what you need to do is just break it into smaller steps. Even write it out. Take a notebook or use Optimal Work and break it down into smaller steps. That alone will allow you to work away at it. Say you have 10 extra minutes here, you have 15 extra minutes here, and if you have it already broken down, okay, I'm just going to do this part. I'm just going to reconcile my accounts. I'm just going to go and categorize Quicken. And you do it bit by bit, and then you find, wow, you've actually done a great deal, even maybe not even setting aside a time to do it, because you put order into the task ahead of time by breaking it down into small parts that could be ordered.
Very good, very good, very practical. Well, just one of the things that usurps a lot of people, including leaders, is the whole area of distractions. So for some, it's been exacerbated by working from home and additional distractions on top of the normal ones. But often you hear as well, we have sense maybe that technology is the problem, or social media or emails or even colleagues are distracting us from not making progress on our priorities, our important goals. Are we right to blame external things for our distractions, or really is it more something coming from inside, from our own attitude or mindset?
Yeah, Ronan, I love that question. So the distractions are always you. It's always internal. Okay. Interruptions don't have to break flow at all. So you could be in flow and a colleague comes. the trick is you just have to give your whole attention to the person interrupting you, and then you put your whole attention back. You haven't broken flow at all. So that's different than a distraction. A distraction is a misstep. Okay, so this gets into a little bit of neuroscience. I'll just skim over the surface. But we actually have two types of attention. It's like a front brain attention and a back brain attention. The front brain attention is task attention, and it's what you use when you're in flow. It's what you're conscious of using when you're in flow. The background attention is always predicting what is going to come next. And as it gets that prediction closer and closer, you start to feel your task attention getting magnetically pulled to that predicted task. As long as you lay out the steps of a task you're going to work on in advance, your background attention knows what to predict. And so it can more easily pull you through those steps. The more you've set a little bit of a perimeter around your work, put your phone on do not disturb maybe, or close out the programs you don't need, turn out, shut the email and social media programs, so that you're kind of signaling to your predictor, hey, don't predict that, I'm not going to do it. You have to shape your predictive attention, and you do that by setting a perimeter and laying out steps. Then it knows how to make the right prediction for what to do next, and you feel yourself get magnetically pulled to that next step. But if it doesn't know, let's say you have sticky notes all around your screen reminding you of things, well, your predictive attention is going to wonder, where's he going next? What's he going to do? Oh, here's a sticky note, and you're going to be distracted by it. If you have anything on your desk, your predictive attention is going to be, oh, that must be contenders for this next hour of work, and you'll get pulled to them. Clear the desk, no sticky notes. Have just the thing you're going to work on in front of you to make the job easier for your predictor. Then, because a distraction simply is a misprediction. It thought there was something else that you wanted to do. And why did it think that? Because you trained it that way. You trained it that, for instance, if you get frustrated or stuck on the step, oh, that means it's time for Facebook. Oh, that means it's time for this. And then you get magnetically pulled to that other thing. But it's totally trainable. It's you. So it's a large part of your intelligence, actually, is what's happening in the background. So you just have to give it an easy job, close things out, set the stage clearly for what you want to do, have the steps laid out, and just kind of have a goal you're trying to get to, and then it finds it easy. So what the challenge does actually is it kind of tells your predictive attention what you're trying to attain. That way, just like if you start a meeting and you have an agenda and a stop time, now the predictive attention of everyone in the room knows what's to be attained. And then it works to pull everyone together, each person's attention. So this is interesting, very interesting neuroscience, but it's super practical.
Super practical.
Once you learn how to train your predictive attention by putting order into the task, then you get continual intensity.
I heard you talking at some point about the opposite of distraction maybe being traction, being pulled towards what you want to achieve, rather than distraction is taking you away from that, which is I thought was good, very good.
Exactly.
Idea.
No, traction comes from just having broken things down in advance. So you have a clear strategy, and then you get traction, and you get eventually momentum, and that's what actually flow is. Flow is when you have that momentum in the task. If you get slippage and you just don't know where to go, okay, you just need to re-strategize. And there is something sometimes people can have in work where it's hard to lay out the steps in advance. Then it's more important that you have a sense of the ultimate place you want to get in this. Because maybe the way you were trying to go isn't the best way. And sometimes you can feel like you're in a cloud of unknowing. But you just have to make sure you have a sense of what's the right direction. It's like, being stuck in a cloud in a mountain. At least need to keep feeling your way through until you find a clear path up.
Very good, very good. Well, one of the, just to move on a little bit to one of the purposes of Timoney Leadership Institute is help people prioritize people over projects, over things, and first of all, leaders themselves and their own self-awareness and those that they're working with. But what would you say is the pursuit of outcomes in our work, particularly as leaders, is a very important fact of life. It's there. What role does that play in setting priorities, and how that relates to prioritizing people?
No, it's a super important question. I can only give a brief outline here of an answer. There is actually a podcast on this, that I have in the golden hour, or on YouTube. You just look up the channel for Optimal Work, and I think it's called Putting People Over Projects. Okay. So, and you think of these two categories, people and projects, and then think of ends and means. If you turn outcomes, the project, into an end, then people become means, and you're just using them. Mm-hmm. But if people are your end, then the outcomes are just means of serving them. That fits, because outcomes are actually only means to an end. The end is actually the people. It could be yourself, your own growth. It can be your family and how you are better able to be with them because you worked well through the day. It can be your coworkers, the clients, customers, but people are actually the only real ends that we confront in work. Mm-hmm. Everything else is a means. And so you can be flexible then, with outcomes, because really, ultimately, it's about the people. If you turn outcomes into ends in themselves, they become rigid, and then people don't really fit. And you end up just doing things to accomplish them, which is just to get them done, which means essentially no meaning anymore, no humanity, no real human value in it. And so it's an impoverished way of working, just getting things done. Mm. Even just think of even if you're thinking of, say you have to tell a loved one, something, you really feel you have to say something to them. If you just get that done, you're just going to say the words. If you're really aiming, though, to show your love for them and concern for them, you're going to take much more care of how you say it and your whole manner of saying it. You're going to more effectively communicate with them. Even in just communicating, getting it done, just by getting the words out, is not the main problem. It's about the warmth and the ideals that you're conveying by doing it. That's what matters.
Very good. And I suppose achieving outcomes, they're throughout our whole life, they're endless. They keep arising, things to be done, things. So I suppose it's how we do that is also where we'll find fulfillment.
Yes, and ideals are endless, but in an encouraging way. You can never say, "Oh, now I'm patient enough. Now I'm loving enough. I've attained that." No, it's always that there's deeper and deeper ways of growing in wisdom and prudence and understanding, all these things.
Very good.
But it's encouraging and motivating to see yourself making progress towards those high ideals. Outcomes are also endless, because as soon as you attain one, it loses all value, and now you have to set another one, and then you get there and it loses value, and you attain another one, and it's a negative kind of infinity. Even if they're very satisfying outcomes. It's brief. Satisfaction is always short term.
Short term, yeah.
Meaning is long term.
Very good. Well, I see there's a couple of questions in, but one that Ivan asks about, essentially, do you believe there's a limit to our growth as you're achieving?
Not according to ideals. In certain skills, maybe, even there, is there a limit to any particular skill? Yeah, maybe, but for ideals, no, you can always grow in ideals. And that's partly what makes ideals the source of unlimited energy. So we get energy, we get dopamine from making progress towards goals that matter. Mm-hmm. If those goals are growing in ideals, as long as you're growing in the ideal, you get dopamine, which means you feel renewed and you feel refreshed. Mm-hmm. And you feel a drive. So ideals actually supply endless drive. So outcomes, you get drive until you obtain them, and then the drive is gone. And you have to set a new outcome. And then but it also tends to be short-term things. I mean, in the end, all things even to get the promotion, to make more money, all of that is just short-term things. Once you get them, they lose their value.
They lose their value.
Ideals are always long-term.
And they help us keep growing, keep serving, keep coming back.
Exactly. Ideals actually are you're learning to shape the process rather than the outcome. Yeah, and by working on the process, you actually get the best outcomes too. It's like if you're trying to hit a bullseye, with the bow and arrow. It's much more important that you shape your process, the form, how you're doing it, than just seeing, did I happen to get a bullseye that time?
Yeah.
If you just focus on, or like a tennis swing or golf swing, if you just focus on the form and getting better and better at aspects of it, you end up getting better and better outcomes eventually.
Very good, very good. So what's the best legacy a leader can aim for then?
I think an organization that has a culture of growth, that fosters the people with an entrepreneurial spirit, not to outcomes and making money, but to actually growth in the people and in the culture of the company.
So continuous learning is a key part of that.
Exactly.
Very good, very good. Well, another question here from Santiago, who asks about how can we help people better in our teams to respect the work-life balance during lockdown, which a lot of people are putting in more hours, but maybe less quality. Any thoughts on that?
I think that having an end time for the day will get everyone working better. And I think that's become more and more common. I'm in Cambridge, and so we have like a lot of startups here. It's like an East Coast Silicon Valley, but they do something very well, which is there is a start time to the day and an end time to the day. And that's a very common thing in these younger companies. And you get better work done, because if there's no end time to the day, then afternoons will lose their intensity. If you know that you're going to work on this until 5 or 5:30, whatever it might be, and then you're done after that, you actually have a much better sense of challenge in the afternoon, and the work is much higher quality. So you don't get more work out of people by having longer hours, not at all. You can only have so many good golden hours in a day.
Okay. Well, that's a very good note maybe to wrap up, because we are getting to the end of the day here. I know you're only halfway through there in Boston.
Exactly, yes.
Thank you very much for sharing those insights with us today. I know there's a lot more behind the scenes there that merits reflecting on and thinking about. But where can people find out more about your work and the tools that you were suggesting there?
So there is optimalwork.com. Which has some of the tools that I've been talking about, how to set up a golden hour. Inside of Optimal Work, though, there's something that we've created called the Masterclass. And the Masterclass is a 4-week training program, building step by step. We took the whole process of total growth and broke it down into smaller steps and arranged them in the easiest way to go through. And so it takes about 15, 20 minutes in the morning to do. People can, once they get the masterclass, they can do it at their leisure. You could do it once a week, or you could do it, 5 days a week, and it's there. But that leads them through the process of growing. And now we've had a lot of people go through the masterclass, and we measure their growth. We have a measure called the inventory. Just to say, it's phenomenal. The quality of the growth people get, because the masterclass gives them all the concepts, bit by bit, cause and effect, to see how to really work at their best and live at their best.
Fantastic, great. Well, we'll put links up to that in due course. So thank you very much for that, and look forward to exploring it further. Before we close up, I'd like to remind you that next Wednesday we have our masterclass, our own masterclass with Valeria Fratocci, who will be discussing a case study featuring some real challenges around our new way of working remotely and online. There's still a handful of places available if you'd like to attend, and you can find out more details on our website. And then in March, we will be joined by Professor Rory MacDonald from the Harvard Business School. He'll be exploring what can be learnt from the Parrot drone case study which you wrote last year, which asks questions about how to compete and how to win and when market conditions change in a significant way, as indeed they have for many of us. And lastly then, we've opened up our applications process for the 2021 edition of the Advanced Leadership Programme, starting next September. So if you or a colleague are interested in taking ownership for your continuous learning and the year ahead, I'd encourage you to get in touch and explore that further, so that you're ready to take up the opportunity when when conditions allow. Today's session will also be available as a podcast on all the main podcast channels on the Timoney Leadership Institute podcast. Please do subscribe to it and share it if you like. Thank you again to all of you, our listeners, and especially to Dr. Kevin Majeres for his generosity in sharing insights with us. And thank you also to Claire and Alison on our podcast team. That sounds good, doesn't it? Anyway, we look forward to having you back again soon, and take care and stay positive, or maybe is it negative? Anyway, have a good evening.